When my brother smirked and slid his truck into the parking space assigned to my condo, everyone at the family cookout laughed like I was being dramatic again. He raised his drink, called me petty, and said blood should matter more than painted numbers on asphalt. I smiled because by then the tow company was already on the way, and the bank manager standing beside my mother had just recognized my name. Before we get into it, tell me where you are watching from and stay close tonight. My name is Mallory Reeves, and until that Saturday, my family had spent most of my adult life treating me like I was the cold one. Not cruel, not selfish, just inconvenient. I was the daughter who kept receipts, asked follow-up questions, and refused to mistake manipulation for love. In my family, that made me difficult. My younger brother Nolan was the opposite. Nolan was loud, charming, messy, and constantly forgiven. He could wreck a holiday with one selfish choice, then somehow leave with leftover sympathy and a fresh offer of help from our mother. We lived in Charleston then, in a polished condo complex near the river, where parking was scarce and rules were strict. I had bought my place a little over a year earlier, after nearly a decade of grinding my way through corporate accounting, freelance tax consulting, and side work that left my weekends hollow. My condo was small but beautiful. White cabinets, warm wood floors, a tiny balcony with potted herbs, and one assigned parking space that came with the mortgage. That space mattered because guest parking filled up fast, and towing was aggressively enforced. Nolan knew that. Everyone knew that. Which is why the whole thing would have been irritating but ordinary if it had only been about the parking spot. It was not. The cookout had been my mother's idea. She called it a fresh start for the family. Those words usually meant one thing: Nolan had done something reckless, and she wanted the rest of us to help absorb the damage without asking too many questions. I almost did not go, but she had sounded unusually emotional on the phone. "Please come," she said. "I need everybody together. No tension, no old grudges." That alone put me on alert. My mother, Denise, never asked for peace unless she had already chosen who was expected to sacrifice it. When I arrived, Nolan's truck was already in my spot. A black pickup, oversized and smug, parked slightly over the line, like the asphalt itself owed him extra room. I sat there for a full minute with my blinker on, staring at it. Then I looked toward the common courtyard and saw my family gathered around the grill like they had posed there for a commercial. My mother in a linen blouse, all soft concern and controlled nerves. My Aunt Felicia laughing too loudly. My cousin Brett with a beer in hand. Nolan near the picnic table, sunglasses on one arm, draped over his pregnant wife Kelsey's chair like he had founded the entire neighborhood. No one moved. Not one person waved apologetically or came over to help. That was the first sign. The second was the woman standing beside my mother. Crisp navy blazer, leather portfolio, neat silver hair, the posture of someone who did not come to a family cookout for leisure. I recognized her face after a moment. Regina Talbot, regional branch manager from First Atlantic Community Bank. I knew her because I had refinanced my condo through one of their partner officers. She was not family, she was business. And yet there she was, holding a folder while my mother kept glancing at it like it contained oxygen. I parked temporarily in a loading zone and walked over. Nolan lifted his drink the second he saw me. "Well, look who finally decided to join civilization." "You are in my spot," I said. He grinned. "There are a lot of spots in the world, Mal. This one is mine." My aunt made a face like I was spoiling dessert before it was served. Kelsey rubbed her belly and stared at the table. My mother stepped in with that exhausted tone she used only when she wanted to make my reasonable reaction sound emotionally violent. "It is one afternoon, sweetheart." I hate that word when it comes from her. Sweetheart always meant be smaller. I looked at Regina. "Is there a reason a bank manager is at this cookout?" Regina's expression flickered. Professional, careful, curious. Before she could answer, my mother said, "We can talk about that later." No, that meant now. I had worked too long with numbers and paper trails to ignore the smell of concealed intent. And I knew my family well enough to understand their choreography. Nolan creates the chaos. My mother reframes it as love. Everyone else performs confusion until the target gets tired and gives in. Usually the target was me. Nolan leaned back in his chair. "You always make everything weird." "Because I asked why a banker is here. Because you act like every little thing is a lawsuit." That line landed hard because 6 months earlier, I had threatened legal action when he borrowed my late father's antique tools, sold half of them without permission, and then accused me of valuing objects over family when I demanded repayment. He still had not repaid me. I folded my arms. "Move the truck." He laughed, or what? The cookout went quiet in that ugly, expectant way families do when they are secretly thrilled by conflict as long as it is not aimed at them. I took out my phone. Nolan snorted, "Are you serious?" My mother looked horrified, not because he had done something wrong, but because I was refusing to make it easy. Mallory, do not start. You asked for peace, I said. Peace starts with respecting my home. Your home, Nolan said with exaggerated wonder, that you got because you were always Dad's favorite. That line hit me in the chest. My father had been the only person in that family who ever looked at my work and called it what it was: discipline. He died 3 years earlier, and ever since Nolan had been rewriting history to explain why I had stability, and he did not. Not because I worked harder, because I was favored. That was the story he needed. Regina stepped forward slightly then, and I saw it. Recognition. She knew something. I lowered the phone but did not put it away. What exactly are you all doing? My mother pressed her lips together. Nolan glanced at her, then at Regina, then back at me. That little triangle told me everything. The truck in my spot was not just disrespect, it was theater. They wanted me distracted, emotional, defensive. They wanted to frame me as unreasonable before the real conversation began. My stomach turned cold. Regina finally spoke. "Ms. Reeves, I believe you and I should talk privately." My mother immediately said, "There is no need to make this dramatic." There it was again, dramatic. The family word for any fact they did not like. I looked at Regina. "Please continue." She hesitated, then said, "A request was submitted to our office this week regarding a secured line of credit tied to a property listed under your family trust documentation." I froze. My father had left behind a modest trust. Nothing extravagant. Mostly the proceeds from the sale of his machine shop, split carefully across several protected categories. Some of it had been used to cover my mother's living expenses. Some had been allocated for future medical costs. A small business reserve fund had been attached for Nolan, but only under strict conditions. One clause required proof of tax compliance and no outstanding judgments. My father had known his son. There had also been a smaller investment parcel attached to me as successor trustee if my mother became unable or unwilling to manage the terms honestly. I had not thought about that clause in months. I looked at my mother. She would not meet my eyes. Regina continued carefully. The application included transfer consent forms, an evaluation letter indicating that the reserve fund had been consolidated with personal collateral to back a commercial expansion loan. Commercial expansion. Nolan had been talking for months about opening an auto detailing franchise with two friends who looked permanently one missed payment away from disappearance. "You used the trust?" I asked. No one answered. I did not realize I was shaking until my car keys rattled in my hand. "You used Dad's trust to secure Nolan's business." My mother snapped then, like my anger had finally inconvenienced her enough to justify honesty. "It was supposed to help family." "Answer the question." "Yes," she said, "but it is not what you think. It never is, according to people caught red-handed." Regina looked deeply uncomfortable. The bank flagged the file because some signatures appeared inconsistent. Also, because your name was listed in a confirmation roll. I felt my skin go cold. My name, listed. I stepped closer. Was there a signature for me? She nodded once. The world narrowed. I have seen forged signatures before. In my work in audits and ugly divorce files, friends should never have shown me. There is a particular nausea that comes from hearing someone used your identity as a tool. Nolan stood up at last. "Oh my God, you are acting like we robbed a vault." I turned to him slowly. "Did you forge my signature?" He rolled his eyes. "Mom handled the paperwork." "Coward!" I looked at my mother. Her face collapsed into a strange mixture of shame and indignation. The look of someone who knows she crossed a line, but still believes love should erase the consequences. "It was temporary," she said. "He just needed leverage to get approved. Once the business took off, everything would have been replaced." "With what money?" I asked. "The money he does not have. The money from the taxes he still has not paid, or maybe from the insurance payment he lied about last winter." Kelsey looked up sharply. So she had not known everything. My aunt said, "Now wait a minute." "No," I said. "Do not tell me to wait." My name was used on bank forms without consent. Regina opened the folder, then perhaps realizing the illusion of a casual family conversation was over. She showed me the top page. I only needed one glance. It was my signature, or a clumsy attempt at it. The angle was wrong. The pressure pattern was wrong. They had copied the shape, not the motion. A lifetime of family excuses disappeared in one instant. This was not favoritism anymore. This was fraud. And then it got worse, because behind the signature page was a property schedule, and attached to the trust line item was my condo address. I stared at it confused for half a second, then horrified. Number. Regina's face tightened. It appears your property may have been referenced as supporting stability documentation in the application package. That is one of the reasons we paused review. I could barely hear after that. My condo, my home. Not legally pledged, not fully attached perhaps, but dragged into the paperwork like collateral atmosphere, like proof. Like something they could point to and say, see, the family has assets, the daughter is stable, the trust is secure, approve the loan. They had taken my name, my credibility, my home address, and my father's estate and wrapped all of it around Nolan's latest gamble. All while inviting me to a cookout and parking in my space. My mother stepped toward me. We were going to explain. No, I said. You were going to pressure me after the fact. That is unfair. Is it? She looked wounded. Genuine or strategic, I no longer cared. Nolan spread his hands. You have always had more than me. I laughed, then one short sound full of pure disbelief. More. I worked for mine. You drained every rescue fund this family had and called it bad luck. You think you are better than everybody. I think forgery is a crime. That was when he made his mistake. He smirked and said, then prove it. I looked at my truck still parked in my spot like he owned the air around it, and something inside me settled into place. I called the tow company. While it rang, I looked straight at Regina and said, I want copies of everything. And I want the fraud department notified that I never authorized any of this. My mother actually gasped, as though consequences were the shocking part. Nolan still looked amused. He thought this was another family flare-up. Another argument that would end with tears, pressure, and a reluctant compromise. Because holidays were coming, and Kelsey was pregnant, and I was expected to be the rational one. He did not notice the tow truck turning into the lot. Not yet. And he definitely did not notice that Kelsey had gone pale as paper. What people never understand about a family built on denial is that the first public crack changes everything. Secrets survive because everyone agrees to perform normal. Once that performance breaks even slightly, every glance becomes evidence. The tow truck pulled in with a low hydraulic groan that sliced through the courtyard chatter. Heads turned. Nolan looked over his shoulder, still too arrogant to believe the sound had anything to do with him. Then the driver slowed beside his truck. The silence that followed felt holy. Nolan, my aunt whispered, is that for you? He laughed, but it came out thin. No chance. I raised my hand to the driver. Black pickup in reserved space. Authorization has already been verified with the property office. That was not entirely luck. While the truck was on the way, I had also called the condo management emergency line. The manager on call, a woman named Teresa, who had helped me during a burst pipe 6 months earlier, confirmed what I already knew. Assigned space violations could be towed immediately by the space owner. She stayed on speaker long enough to verify my unit number and the placard assignment. Nolan finally lost the smile. You are insane. No, I said, I am done. He strode toward me, but the tow driver stepped between us with the casual authority of a man who had seen this exact form of male stupidity 1,000 times. Sir, back away from the vehicle. My mother rushed in. Mallory, stop this right now. We are family. That did not stop you when you forged my name. Regina did not say a word, but she did not leave either. She stood there with the folder pressed against her side, watching my mother unravel. Nolan pointed at me like I was the criminal. You are doing this over a parking space. I met his eyes. No. I am doing this because you thought you could build a business on theft and call it family support. That landed. Not because he felt shame, because other people were hearing it now. Neighbors had drifted onto balconies. A man walking his dog stopped near the gate. 2 teenagers by the mail kiosk were openly staring. Public embarrassment had entered the chat, and people like Nolan hated that more than actual accountability. My mother grabbed my arm. I pulled away immediately. Do not touch me. Her face crumpled. I did this because your father always made it impossible to help Nolan. I could not believe what I was hearing. Impossible. He set conditions. Basic conditions. No tax debt. No fraud. No gambling. No using family as an emergency loan machine. Nolan needed a chance. He has had chances. He just burns through them faster than you can rename them. The tow driver hooked the front axle. Nolan lunged for the truck, then shouting that I had no right, that he would sue, that I had always been vindictive. Kelsey stood slowly from her chair, one hand braced against her lower back, looking less like a wife defending her husband and more like a woman replaying every strange conversation from the last 6 months. That was when Regina spoke again, her voice calm and clipped. For the record, Ms. Reeves is within her rights regarding the parking enforcement. As for the loan documents, the bank will be freezing further review pending a fraud investigation. My mother whipped around. Regina, please, this can be corrected privately. Regina's face hardened in a way I will never forget. It was the expression of a woman who had probably spent years watching people with polished manners commit ugly acts and then ask for discretion. Forgery involving financial instruments is not a private misunderstanding. Nolan swore under his breath. Kelsey turned to him. Forgery. He did not answer fast enough. Forgery, she repeated louder this time. It is not like that, my mother said. Kelsey looked at me, then at the folder, then back at Nolan. Did you tell me the bank only needed income verification? There it was. The first fracture inside their own unit. Nolan rubbed his face. I told you what mattered. That is not an answer. My cousin Brett stepped back like he had suddenly remembered urgent plans elsewhere. Aunt Felicia stared at the paper in Regina's hand as if it might somehow accuse her next. People were repositioning. That happens when a lie stops being useful. I took a slow breath and focused because I knew emotion alone would not save me. If I wanted this to become more than a chaotic family fight, I needed sequence documentation and witnesses. I held out my hand to Regina. May I see the file again? She hesitated only a second before handing it over. I scanned faster this time. Loan application. Estimated business projections with absurd revenue growth. Supporting trust letter on copied stationery that looked almost authentic until you noticed the footer was from an older document version. Signature page with my forged name. A statement of family asset continuity referencing my condo address and the reserve trust category. Then I saw something else. A transfer authorization memo tied to a disbursement account. The last 4 digits were familiar. Not because it was my account, because it had been my father's business equipment liquidation account before the trust conversion. I looked at my mother. You accessed the reserve account early. Her eyes widened slightly. That was enough. How much? No answer. How much? She whispered it. 28,000. The courtyard went still again. That money had not even been fully disbursed yet under the trust schedule. She had pulled from a protected reserve before Nolan met the release conditions. I felt anger rise in me so sharply that for a second my vision blurred. That was restricted. It was bridge money, Nolan snapped. I was going to put it back. With what? The business launch. The business that does not exist yet. He said nothing. I turned pages again and found the vendor sheet. Office lease deposit, equipment financing estimate, branding expenses, vehicle wrap proposal, consulting fees, and one line that made my stomach drop. Debt consolidation. You used trust funds to cover personal debt. My mother's voice shook. It was all connected. Meaning yes. Nolan crossed his arms. You always act like money is moral. No, I said. I act like fraud is traceable. Kelsey sank back into her chair staring at him. Were you paying off the sportsbook account? He closed his eyes for half a second. That told her everything. She made a sound then, not loud but raw. The sound of a person realizing she has been building her future on a sinkhole. The tow truck started pulling his pickup backward. Nolan spun toward it. You cannot take my truck. The driver shrugged. Then you should not park where you do not belong. I almost laughed at the simplicity of that sentence. It applied to much more than parking. My mother tried one more time. Mallory, please. If you report this formally, you will destroy this family. There it was, the oldest lie. Not the theft, not the forgery, not the misuse of Dad's trust. Me. My refusal to absorb it quietly would be the destruction. I looked at her for a long moment and finally understood something that should have been obvious years earlier. My mother did not protect family. She protected the person who demanded the most from her. She called it compassion when it was actually fear. Fear of Nolan's anger, Nolan's recklessness, Nolan's collapse. And because she feared him, she kept offering up pieces of everyone else to keep him stable. My inheritance, my credibility, my home. Enough! I took out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Then I said clearly for everyone there to hear, I want this on record. I did not authorize any use of my name, signature, property information, or trustee authority in connection with Nolan Reeves, Denise Reeves, or any loan line of credit or business filing attached to my father's trust. My mother went white. Nolan laughed again, but this time it was pure panic dressed as contempt. You think recording yourself makes you smart? No, I think documentation makes me safe. Regina gave the smallest nod. Then Kelsey did something none of us expected. She stood, walked to the table, grabbed Nolan's leather portfolio bag, and dumped the contents onto the picnic table. Receipts, printouts, a second folder, two unopened bank letters, a casino rewards card, a temporary checkbook for a business account not yet approved. And sliding face up into the center of the mess, a property tax delinquency notice addressed to Nolan. My mother gasped. Kelsey stared at him with terrifying calm. You told me those taxes were handled. He tried to gather the papers. She slapped his hand away. I'm asking one time, did you lie to me too? He looked around, seeing the audience, calculating. That is what manipulators do. They do not ask what is right. They ask what version they can still survive. It got complicated. Kelsey laughed bitterly. Of course it did. She picked up one of the unopened letters and looked at the envelope window. Final notice. Then another. Past due. Then the delinquency notice. Then she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw humiliation turning into alignment. I did not trust her yet, but I recognized the moment someone stops standing beside the fire and realizes they are inside it. Regina requested the folders. Kelsey handed them over. My mother looked at her like betrayal had just entered the family. The irony almost choked me. Regina skimmed the documents quickly, then exhaled. These need to go directly to our internal investigators. Nolan swore at Kelsey, not under his breath, at full volume. The neighbors definitely heard that. The dog walker definitely heard that. And most importantly, people in my family heard it without any filter or excuse. The charming son disappeared right there in daylight. I stepped back and let him keep talking, because sometimes the truth sounds clearest when you stop interrupting liars. He ranted about pressure, about expectations, about dad setting him up to fail, about me hoarding success, about Kelsey not understanding what it took to build something. Every sentence was a confession wearing someone else's face. When he finally stopped breathing hard, the tow truck rolled his pickup out through the gate. Gone. A stupid image maybe, but the symbolism was perfect. His place in my space had ended. Regina closed the folder. Ms. Reeves, I strongly recommend filing a police report and placing an immediate fraud alert on your accounts. Also, if you are in fact successor trustee under the estate documents, you need independent counsel today. I know an attorney, I said, and I did. Tessa Monroe, estate litigation specialist, terrifying in heels, allergic to nonsense. My mother shook her head slowly, like she still could not believe I was choosing law over silence. I never thought you would do this to your own brother. I looked at her with more sadness than anger now. You already did. That was the first major climax, though I did not know it then. Because public exposure feels like the end when you have lived inside denial for years. In reality, it was only the opening door. The real war began. The moment I went upstairs, locked my condo door spread, every memory I had ever minimized across my kitchen table, and realized this was never just one forged signature. It was a pattern. And if I wanted justice, I was going to have to prove the whole design. The moment my condo door closed behind me, the noise of the courtyard faded, but the weight of what had happened did not. My kitchen table became a battlefield within minutes. I cleared away the potted herbs and the unopened mail, then laid out every document Regina had allowed me to photograph before leaving. For years, I had trained myself to notice patterns in numbers. Fraud never begins with a dramatic act. It begins with small adjustments that feel temporary: a borrowed transfer, a shifted account description, a signature copied once, then twice, until the act itself feels ordinary. Now I looked at the photographs again, slower. My forged signature was not the only problem. The formatting of the trust memo used an outdated template my father had retired before his death. The header referenced an earlier version of the trust language that only someone with access to old files could have copied. My mother had those files. But the numbers attached to Nolan's loan projections were something else entirely. They were familiar. I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet from an old consulting client. The columns aligned in a way that made my stomach tighten. Nolan's projected revenue structure was nearly identical to a financial model I had built for a legitimate automotive detailing franchise client 2 years earlier. He had copied my work, not just conceptually, line for line, which meant he had access to my old consulting folders. I leaned back slowly in my chair. That realization changed the scope of everything. This was not just family desperation, it was calculated borrowing of my professional credibility. I took a screenshot and saved it in a new folder labeled with a single word: Evidence. Then I called the one person I trusted to look at this without emotional hesitation. Tessa Monroe, the voice answered on the second ring. Tessa, it is Mallory. There was a pause, then a low whistle. If you are calling me after sunset, someone in your life probably made a catastrophic mistake. You have no idea. I explained everything. The forged signature, the trust reserve withdrawal, the loan application, my condo address listed as stability collateral, the copied financial projections. Tessa did not interrupt once. When I finished, she said one sentence that made my chest tighten with relief. They just handed you a fraud case with witnesses. What should I do first? 3 things. Freeze every financial account connected to your identity. Pull the official trust documents tonight. And do not talk to your family again without documentation. I already recorded part of the conversation. Good. Also send me everything you photographed. If your brother used your financial models, that adds misrepresentation. Banks take that very seriously. I sent the files within minutes. While they uploaded, I opened the safe drawer in my hallway cabinet. Inside was a slim black binder my father had given me shortly before he passed away. He had called it boring paperwork. But when I opened it, the pages felt heavier than memory. The Reeves Family Trust. I flipped through carefully until I reached the clause I had almost forgotten. Successor Trustee Authority. My father had written a personal note beside that paragraph in blue ink. Mallory will only step in if necessary. She understands responsibility. I sat there for a long time staring at those words. Then I scanned the entire binder and sent the documents to Tessa. Within 15 minutes, she called back. Mallory. Yes. You are not just successor trustee. What do you mean? There is an enforcement clause your mother probably hoped you never noticed. My pulse quickened. What kind of clause? A protection clause for misuse of trust assets. If the acting trustee violates the fiduciary restrictions, authority immediately transfers to the successor. I sat upright. You mean me? Yes. And based on what you told me about the early reserve withdrawal, that clause may already have triggered. The air in my apartment felt suddenly sharper. If that is true, I said slowly, then my mother no longer controls the trust. Correct. And if Nolan's loan application relied on authority, she no longer legally had. The bank will escalate quickly. For the first time that night, something inside me felt steady. This was not just emotional conflict anymore. It was law. Tessa continued. Mallory, you need allies who understand the financial side of this. Do you trust the bank manager? Regina. Yes. I think she came today because something looked wrong. Then call her. So I did. Regina answered after 2 rings. I suspected you might reach out. I have the trust documents, I said. And I think my mother may have lost trustee authority before she signed those loan forms. There was a quiet inhale on the other end. That would explain several things. Would you be willing to review them? Send them. I forwarded the files. While she examined them, I stepped onto my balcony for air. The river lights shimmered in the distance. Somewhere across the complex, a dog barked once, then again. The world outside my family drama continued as if nothing had shifted, but inside my life the axis had moved. Regina called back 20 minutes later. You were correct, she said. About the clause. Yes. If the reserve funds were withdrawn without meeting the release conditions, fiduciary authority would revert to the successor trustee immediately. That means my mother did not have legal authority to submit the loan. Exactly. A strange calm settled over me. For years I had been cast as the difficult daughter, the cold one, the calculating one. Now calculation was the only thing standing between my father's legacy and total financial collapse. Regina's voice softened slightly. You should also know something else. What? Your brother's application included a personal reference letter. From who? She hesitated. From someone inside your extended family. That surprised me. Who? Your cousin Brett. I frowned. Brett had barely spoken during the cookout. He had kept drifting toward the edge of the conversation like someone waiting for a ride. What did the letter say? That he had personally reviewed Nolan's financial model and confirmed its credibility. I almost laughed. Brett had never reviewed anything more complicated than a sports betting app. Did he submit the letter through the bank portal? Yes. Which meant he had actively participated, not just stood there while the mess happened. Another thread in the pattern. I thanked Regina and ended the call. Then I texted Tessa. We have another name? Her response came quickly. Good. Fraud cases grow stronger with networks. That word lingered in my mind. Network. Because that was exactly what I needed now. Over the next 2 days, I began building one. First, Tessa contacted a forensic accountant she trusted named Daniel Vargas. He specialized in tracing unauthorized financial movements inside family trusts. Second, Regina opened a formal internal review within the bank. Third, I filed the police fraud report. None of those steps felt dramatic at the time. They felt procedural, slow, almost anticlimactic compared to the emotional explosion at the cookout. But legal systems work that way. They replace shouting with documentation. 3 days later, Daniel called. I reviewed the transaction history you sent, he said. And there are more withdrawals. My stomach tightened. How many? 3 smaller ones before the 28,000. I closed my eyes. How much total? Almost 40,000? That money had been meant for long-term family protection, medical emergencies, housing stability, not gambling debt and imaginary business plans. Can you trace where it went? I asked. I already started. His tone changed slightly. And Mallory, you should prepare yourself. The path may lead somewhere uncomfortable. I thought about Nolan, about my mother, about Brett's letter. I already live there, I said quietly. The alliance was forming. Tessa with the law, Regina with the bank, Daniel with the financial trail, and me with the truth my family had spent years asking me not to see. But alliances are fragile things. Because while I was building mine, someone inside that growing network was already preparing to betray it. The first sign that something inside our alliance was wrong arrived quietly. Too quietly. 3 days after Daniel Vargas began tracing the missing trust funds, he sent me a short message. Mallory, I found the first transfer route. Call when you can. I stepped out of a client meeting and called him from the hallway. Tell me. The earliest withdrawal moved through a temporary clearing account. Then it split into 2 directions. That makes sense, I said. One portion for Nolan's business expenses, the rest for his debt. Daniel paused. That is what I expected too. What did you find instead? One of the transfers did go toward Nolan's debt consolidation, but the other did not go to Nolan at all. I stopped walking. Where did it go? Daniel hesitated again. To a consulting payment. For who? A small private advisory firm. My mind ran through every possibility. Name. Caldwell Advisory. The name meant nothing to me. Owner. Registered under a limited corporate shell. Can you break the shell? Yes, but it will take a little more time. Do it! I hung up and leaned against the wall, trying to process the implications. If Nolan had been the only one draining the trust, the money would have followed him. But someone else had taken a portion, someone who had access to the trust structure, someone who understood how to route funds through a consulting invoice. That meant planning. That meant intelligence. Which meant Nolan probably had help. Later that afternoon, I met with Tessa Monroe in her office. Her firm occupied the top floor of a brick building downtown where every room smelled faintly of leather folders and expensive coffee. I laid the new information on the table. A consulting firm received part of the trust withdrawal. Tessa nodded slowly. That means this was structured. You think Nolan planned it? I think Nolan started it, but someone smarter helped finish it. Who? That is the question. I told her about Brett's reference letter for the bank. Tessa leaned back in her chair. Your cousin Brett works in real estate finance, does he not? Commercial leasing. And he wrote the credibility letter. Yes. That is interesting. Why? Because people who understand financing structures also understand how to move money quietly. The idea unsettled me. Brett had always seemed harmless. Slightly opportunistic maybe, but never malicious. Still, harmless people do not accidentally submit formal reference letters to banks. Tessa made a note. We will add him to the review. I nodded, but part of me resisted the idea. Family betrayal had already reached uncomfortable levels. Adding Brett felt excessive. I was wrong. 2 days later, Daniel called again. I broke the shell, and Caldwell Advisory is owned by a holding company. Who's? Brett Langford. The words hit me harder than anything Nolan had done. Are you sure? Yes. Silence filled the line. Then Daniel added something that made my stomach drop. And the consulting invoice that justified the payment was attached to Nolan's loan application packet, meaning Brett helped prepare the loan file. Exactly. That explained the financial model, the copied projections, the professional formatting. Nolan did not create those documents. Brett did, which meant the fraud was bigger than family desperation. It was collaboration. I thanked Daniel and ended the call. Then I sat at my kitchen table staring at the river outside my window, while a slow anger built in my chest. Brett had stood at the cookout watching everything unfold, watching Nolan lie, watching my mother panic, watching me defend myself, all while knowing he had already taken money from the trust. I called Tessa immediately. You were right. I usually am, she said dryly. Tell me. Caldwell Advisory belongs to Brett. There was no surprise in her voice. That simplifies things. It complicates things. Emotionally, yes. Legally, it strengthens the case. How? Because it proves conspiracy. That word changed the atmosphere completely. Conspiracy, not a mistake, not family misunderstanding. A coordinated financial act. Tessa continued. I want Daniel to keep tracing the money. Meanwhile, we prepare for the possibility that Brett will try to protect himself. How? By shifting blame. That warning proved prophetic. The betrayal came sooner than any of us expected. The next morning, I woke to 5 missed calls: 3 from my mother, 2 from Nolan, and 1 message from Brett. Mallory, we need to talk before things get worse. I ignored it and went to work. But by noon, my phone started buzzing again. This time it was Regina. Mallory, something happened. My chest tightened. What? Your cousin Brett contacted the bank. About the loan. Yes. What did he say? Regina exhaled slowly. He claimed you helped design the financial model. For a moment, I could not speak. That is impossible. He also suggested that you knew about the trust withdrawal. The room around me felt suddenly smaller. He is lying. I believe you, Regina said carefully. But the accusation complicates the internal review. Did he provide proofs? He submitted emails. What emails? Financial spreadsheets sent from your address 2 months ago. The blood drained from my face. 2 months ago? That was when my laptop had briefly disappeared during a family dinner at my mother's house. I had assumed Nolan borrowed it to check sports scores. But if Brett had accessed my files that night, he could have copied my consulting model and sent it from my account. Manufacturing evidence. My hands began to shake. They hacked my email. Possibly. Or sent messages from my open laptop. That is also possible. Either way, Brett had just transformed himself from co-conspirator into witness. And he had tried to drag me down with him. I called Tessa again. They are framing me. Slow down, she said calmly. Explain. I did. When I finished, Tessa spoke with controlled intensity. That means Brett is scared. Of what? Of the money trail Daniel is about to finish tracing. What do? We respond with stronger evidence. At that moment, Daniel texted. I found the final destination of the second transfer. I opened the message. It included a bank routing path. The funds had left Brett's advisory account 3 weeks earlier, transferred directly into Nolan's personal gambling debt account. My chest tightened. Brett had taken the trust money, then loaned it back to Nolan, which meant he had been profiting from Nolan's desperation. It was worse than fraud. It was manipulation. I forwarded the evidence to Tessa. Her response came quickly. Perfect. What do you mean perfect? I asked when she called. It means Brett just made the biggest mistake possible, which is, by accusing you, he forced the investigators to look closer. And when they do, they will see the full transfer chain. For the first time since Regina's call, I felt a spark of hope. But hope did not erase the damage Brett had already caused, because by evening the story had spread through the family. My aunt called screaming. My mother left a voicemail sobbing about how I was tearing everyone apart. Nolan posted something vague on social media about betrayal and ambition. And Brett sent one final message. If you keep pushing this, none of us walk away clean. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. You should have thought about that before you stole from Dad. But even with the evidence building, the situation had shifted. Our alliance had been shaken. Trust had cracked. And for the first time since the investigation began, I felt the possibility of losing. Because Brett had managed to turn the narrative against me. Until a completely unexpected ally stepped forward and changed the entire direction of the case. The moment Brett tried to frame me, the investigation stopped being quiet. What had been a careful financial review suddenly became a defensive battle. Accusations move faster than truth, and Brett understood that. If he could make the situation look like a messy family dispute instead of structured fraud, investigators might treat it as a civil conflict rather than a criminal act. For 2 days, the pressure mounted. My mother called repeatedly, alternating between anger and pleading. Nolan left messages claiming everything had been misunderstood. Aunt Felicia told me I was destroying our father's legacy by dragging it into legal review. None of them mentioned the missing trust funds anymore. They only talked about loyalty. That word had become their shield. Meanwhile, Daniel Vargas continued tracing the financial chain with relentless precision. Every transfer created a new piece of the puzzle. The $28,000 withdrawal from the trust had not vanished randomly. It had been divided into smaller movements designed to look harmless. Consulting fees, operational preparation, vendor deposits. But the trail eventually reconverged in one place, Nolan's gambling debt account. And between those transfers sat the advisory firm owned by Brett, which meant the entire structure now looked exactly like what it was. A staged financial maneuver. But Brett's accusations still hung over everything. His claim that I helped create the financial model had introduced doubt. And doubt even when weak slows legal momentum. That changed on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing the trust ledger again when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Mallory Reeves, the woman asked. Yes, this is Kelsey, Nolan's wife. Her voice sounded completely different from the woman who sat quietly at the cookout. The softness had disappeared. In its place was something steady and controlled. "I believe you," she said. I did not answer immediately. About what I asked carefully. About the fraud. The silence between us felt fragile. "What changed?" I asked. "I left Nolan yesterday." The words landed slowly. "I am sorry to hear that." "I am not," she said quietly. "I am sorry I did not see it sooner." She explained what had happened after the cookout. Nolan had come home furious, claiming I was exaggerating everything. At first, she believed him. But the argument continued late into the night, and eventually his story began to collapse. He admitted the gambling debts. He admitted the trust withdrawal. But the final piece came accidentally. During the argument, he mentioned Brett had helped structure the loan documents. That was the moment Kelsey began checking their shared laptop. She found something Nolan never expected her to see: an email chain between Nolan and Brett. Attached to the message was the financial projection spreadsheet. My spreadsheet, but the email timestamp was 2 months earlier. Before the loan application, before the cookout, before the trust withdrawal. That email proved something critical. Brett had accessed my consulting files weeks before the trust funds were moved, which meant the fraud was premeditated, not desperate. Planned. I copied the entire email thread, Kelsey said. My heart began to race. "You have the original files?" "Yes." "Will you share them with investigators?" "Yes." "Why?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because my son deserves better than growing up around men who steal from their own family." Those words felt like oxygen after days of suffocation. Kelsey emailed the files within minutes. I forwarded them directly to Tessa and Daniel. Within an hour, my phone rang again. It was Daniel. "This changes everything," he said. "How?" "The email chain connects Brett to the financial model before the trust withdrawal. Meaning conspiracy, meaning planning. The difference mattered. Planning transforms suspicion into intent. Later that evening, Regina called. Her tone carried a quiet sense of closure. "Our internal investigation just escalated to formal fraud review because of the email chain." "Yes, and because the transfer records Daniel submitted confirm the financial loop." Brett's consulting firm received the trust money first. Then he redirected a portion into Nolan's debt account, using my financial projections to justify the loan application. Exactly. For the first time in a week, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The narrative Brett tried to create had collapsed. But something else happened too. Another unexpected ally stepped forward. The condo property manager Teresa called that evening. "Mallory," she said, "I saw the police report notice posted on the internal bulletin." "Yes. There is something you should know." "What?" "Nolan came to the office the morning before the cookout." My pulse quickened. What did he want? He asked about parking enforcement policies. Why? He wanted to know if someone could be towed immediately for occupying a reserved space. I frowned. "That is obvious." "Yes," Teresa said. "But he also asked something else." "What?" "He asked if the condo owner had to authorize the tow personally." Understanding flooded through me. He had planned the parking situation. The truck in my spot had not been careless arrogance. It had been bait. He expected me to react emotionally, to become angry in front of the bank manager, to make myself look unstable before the fraud discussion even began. But instead, the tow truck had arrived, and the conversation turned toward the truth. Teresa sighed. "I did not realize what he was doing until after the cookout." "You helped more than you know," I said. With Teresa's statement added to the evidence file, the final picture became undeniable. Brett designed the financial structure. Nolan used the trust funds. My mother signed documents she no longer had authority to approve. And together they attempted to build a business using forged credibility. The alliance I had built held firm. Tessa with the legal strategy, Daniel with the financial analysis, Regina with the bank investigation, Teresa with the property confirmation, and Kelsey with the missing proof that revealed the planning. The case was no longer fragile. It was complete. All that remained now was the final collapse. Justice does not always arrive with drama. Sometimes it arrives quietly through paperwork. 2 weeks after the cookout, the official consequences began. The bank formally rejected Nolan's loan application and filed a fraud report with state investigators. Daniel's financial tracing confirmed unauthorized withdrawals totaling nearly $40,000 from the trust reserve. Because my mother had violated the fiduciary clause, trustee authority transferred legally to me. The moment that happened, every remaining trust account froze. Nolan lost access to the reserve funds permanently. Brett's advisory firm received a legal demand for restitution. When investigators reviewed the email chain, Kelsey provided they confirmed the financial projections had been copied directly from my consulting files without authorization. That turned Brett's attempted defense into self-incrimination. Within a month, his advisory firm dissolved under investigation. Nolan faced civil fraud charges connected to the trust misuse and the falsified loan application. My mother was not charged criminally, but she lost all authority over the estate. The hardest conversation came when she visited my condo one evening. For the first time in years, she looked smaller. I thought helping Nolan would protect the family, she said quietly. You protected the problem, I replied. Tears filled her eyes. I did not realize how far it had gone. I know. That conversation did not repair everything, but it ended the illusion. My mother eventually moved into a smaller apartment near my aunt. Nolan relocated out of state after selling most of his remaining assets to settle part of the restitution claim. Brett disappeared from the family circle completely. The noise faded, but something unexpected replaced it. Peace. The trust funds stabilized again under new oversight. My father's legacy remained intact. And the strange thing about surviving betrayal is that it clears space for better people. Kelsey stayed in Charleston. We met for coffee one afternoon, two people connected by the same storm. She had filed for separation and was focusing on raising her son without the chaos Nolan created. You did the right thing, she told me. I wish it had not taken this long. Sometimes truth needs a crisis to be heard. She was right. Over time, my world became quieter. Not empty, just honest. And the parking space outside my condo remained empty every evening when I returned home. Not because people feared me, but because boundaries had finally been respected. Before we finish this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched someone in your family break every rule and still expect loyalty in return? Did karma eventually find them? Or did you have to be the one who finally said enough? Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what you would have done in my place. If this story made you think about justice, family boundaries, or standing up for yourself, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Sharing stories like this helps more people realize they are not alone when loyalty and honesty collide. Thank you for listening to mine, and I truly hope your own story ends with stronger boundaries, wiser choices, and the kind of peace that comes from truth.